So a seller can still opt to pay for the buyer's commission, right? If it's agreed upon on the negotiation, but they don't have to, right? Now, here's where the pros and cons come to that. If a buyer is trying to buy a house, the one thing that they haven't done yet is figure out how to take that commission that they're paying a buyer's agent and wrap it into the loan. So they can't get the relief from the seller. They can't get that. So that money is coming out of their down payment and out of their reserves to qualify for a purchase price. So basically what happens when they have to pay for that 2.5%, their ability to write a stronger offer lessens. They'll end up offering less, right, to cover that. As a seller option, what I've seen be effective, right, and again, it can go either way. What I've seen effective is if you say, okay, we're going to pay for that fee for you or negotiate whatever it might be, right? We'll include it in the sales price. You just negotiate it into the sales price, right? Say, okay, if you want us to pay X amount, the purchase price is this plus X amount, right? And then what happens now is they're able to tie that into their loan and you're able to get a higher sales price, right? And so it just becomes down to how do you determine that? How do you figure it out? So, but there is a strategy to it. Quite honestly, we really haven't seen it affect the market at all. When it first came out, there was this big fear about, holy cow, everything's, which always is. Whenever there's a change, everybody's afraid of everything, right? Thought there was this big fear. No, that wasn't the case. So it's kind of gone business as usual. And I would say a high percentage of the time, the seller is paying for that and incorporating it into the sales price coming through there, right? What I'd say one way or another, as a seller, you're paying for it anyways. You're either paying for it in a lower price or you're incorporating it in a higher price and compensate. So does that make sense? It's a little complicated, but that's how that one worked out. The buy or sell first one, let me jump into here. This is, there's a couple different things that happen here because this comes up all the time, especially for people that have been in their house for a while, or they're moving on from their first time house to their second house, right? What do I do? How do I buy before I sell? How do I sell before I buy, right? So it really comes down to convenience versus options, right? The convenience would be to buy first and then sell because you've got your new home, you can move in, you can go through there, and then you can sell. One of the complications with that is, do you have the backup money to be able to carry both of those mortgages, right? To carry it over and to have that time to carry over, right? Does that happen? Most people don't, right? But there are options, and there's lenders that could say, hey, I can give you a bridge loan and carry it over. They're pretty expensive loans to get. There's some other financing options that can happen to make that happen, as long as you have the down payment, right? They'll go through there. So there are ways to make that happen, but it's a little more difficult. The convenience is you don't have to worry about moving until you have your house, right? And then you can move into that house and then you can sell the other house afterwards. So that's the convenience. Options is selling your house first. If you sell your house first, you know exactly how much you're going to get, right? You know how much that you net coming out of there, and you know how much you can use for the next house at that point in time, right? The downside is you don't know if you're going to find the house that you want to buy before you close on the house that you're selling, right? So you should negotiate kind of a rent back period afterwards to stay in the house after it closes. A lot of buyers will do that, right? Give you an extra month, sometimes even 2 months to come through there. Or you have to plan for like temporary housing, staying with a friend or relative, something like that. So there's more inconvenience when that happens, but you know exactly what you're going to be able to do with this. Okay. There's lenders that can handle both and both options. So any questions on that, just ask later. All right. Chris, we're getting close to you. Tax benefits, right? Let's go through here because this one's always fun. The first thing that I have to say, because this is one of the most important things anybody could listen to. If you own a house in this area, this is really important. First thing I have to throw out the caveat, I'm not an accountant, so I can't give tax advice. Okay. All right. Now, based on my experience, so being in this business, to carry from there, we have 3 different propositions, 19, 60, and 90, if you're familiar with them. So Proposition 60 was a same county proposition that came out several years ago that basically said, did you have a hand up? I saw a hand. That was Adam. Adam was stretching. Waving. Okay. All right. You were waving. So, yeah. So Proposition 60 is the same county. So if you bought and sold in Santa Clara County, you get to keep your property tax base going to the next home, right? As long as you're buying at that sales price or less, okay? And that you're 55 and over. So that's where Proposition 60 was. That's how that worked through there. So then they came out with Proposition 90 to allow people to do the same thing, but throughout the state. So now you could go to different counties in the state and say, okay, as long as I buy at my price or below, I can keep the tax base that I had in the first place, right? That was Proposition 90. The problem with Proposition 90 is that counties had to opt in, right? A county could say, oh no, we're not doing that, right? So it dwindled down to like 12 or 13 counties that did that. So over time, so it really diminished what you were able to do. So the new one that came out, the most recent one, is Proposition 19. Proposition 19 is all encompassing. It covers all of California. So no matter where you go in California, if you're 55 and older and you sell your home, your property tax base, you get to keep as long as you're buying at your sales price or lower. Okay. Now there's a couple of changes to it as well. You can use it anywhere up to 3 times, right? You can move 3 times and use that same factor coming through. Number 2, it's not just 55 and over. It's also for people that have a severe disability, or it's people that were victims of a wildfire or natural disaster. They can do that as well. Okay, so that carries over to there. So the one piece to it to remember on Prop 19 is you can still buy something more than what you sold your property for around the state. You're just going to have to pay the difference, right? So they'll keep the tax base. Like if you sold at 2 million, right? They'll keep your tax base where you're at 2 million. But if you bought at 2.2, that extra $200,000, you would pay the elevated property taxes on those, right? Coming through there. So that's Proposition 19. Does that all make sense? Those always confuse everybody. So I want to make sure we get those clear. Awesome. Okay. Capital gains. Capital gains are the big ones. So 250,000, 500,000. Those are the numbers to remember right now. If you're a single individual, you have a $250,000 capital gains protection, right, for taxes that you're paying. If you're a married couple, it's 500,000. Okay, on top of that. So how it's figured out is how much you purchase the home for. So let's use an example. Let's say it's a $2 million sale right now. You bought it at $1 million. Okay, so you take that purchase price of $1 million, and then you take your upgrades. What have you done to the house? New roof, remodeled the kitchen, did some plumbing, save those receipts. So you take those upgrades and you add them on top of that basis. So let's say those upgrades were 200,000. So now instead of $1 million, your basis is 1.2 million on top of there. Yes.
I know you're not a CPA.
Mhm.
I do have records of all of that.
Mhm.
However, in some cases, I probably have to go digging.
Yeah.
But I believe I have the quotes.
Yeah.
I have essentially bank statements showing that I paid, but I don't have the invoice in some instances.
Yeah.
Some instances for bigger
Yeah.
items. What do I need exactly? Or is this more just like I'm telling my CPA, this is roughly what it is. I have paperwork. Hopefully I'm not audited.
Exactly. That's exactly the answer. So, and a good CPA will say, hey, this will work, right? Or we need to adjust this, or can you go find this, right? Can you contact the company and see if they have a history of it, right? So there are ways to around that, but most of the CPAs are going to be okay. They're going to be able to figure it out. So it's a good question because it's super common. So what did I do with that stuff? Where are the receipts at? So then on top of your upgrade, you're at 1.2 million now. You have the cost of sale. Okay. What does it cost to sell your house? Are you doing staging? Are you doing inspections? Are you making repairs? Are you paying for a realtor's fee, right? Are you paying for title insurance, county transfer fees, city transfer fees, all that? All of that goes on top of that basis as well. Okay. So let's say it's $100,000. So your 1.2 basis is now 1.3 basis on your $1 million purchase. Okay. So now at your 1.3 basis, if you're a married couple, you have 500,000. So now your 1.3 basis goes to 1.8. Okay. If you're a single individual, you have 250. So your 1.3 goes to 1.55. Okay. Now that difference, 1.55 or 1.8 between 2 million, that's your taxable amount. That's the amount that they can come back and tax on. But you have that protection of that 250 to 500. Okay. Another important part that people miss, we actually had a client that missed this and we saved them $700,000 in taxes. So Another one that people miss all the time is a step up value. So if a couple are married and one of them passes away, from the date of the death of when they passed away, the home value is stepped up. So you get an appraisal that comes in. So an appraiser at any point in time can come back and backdate an appraisal and say, here was the value at the time of that event, right? Whatever that value was. So if it was a $1 million purchase to a $2 million sale, but it was 1.7 million at that date, that's the value that's used, not the 1 million. Okay. Again, I'm not an accountant, but those things can save you hundreds of thousands of dollars to know them. So make sure you're having the right conversations. Yes.
So you said even the commission for the realtor can be.
Yep. Yeah, the commission for the realtor, it's considered a cost of sale.
And
your home.
how do they consider you live in the house for, I know it's.
2 out of
at least
5
2
years. 2 out of the last 5 years.
Bill and tax address.
I am not an accountant and I'm not going to give you that advice. I think there's a lot of ways that can go.
Okay.
But basically you have to show the government that you've lived there 2 out of the last 5 years
Before-
before the sale date. And they're very strict. It can't be 2 out of the last 5 years in one day. 2 out of the last 5 years.
And again, just to make sure I understood.
Yeah.
The step up value and the incorporating the commissions and all the closing costs and all that.
Yeah.
So again, in the example where you have a $2 million home, it's purchased at 1 million, essentially you remove that, you account your $250,000 exception if you're single, 500 if you're married.
Yep.
So at this point, you're paying capital gains on 500,000, but then your repairs, let's say you made $50,000 in
Yep.
repairs.
Then it's 450.
It's 450, and then with your commissions and all that.
Yep.
If that ended up being $100,000, then
Right.
what's 350?
Correct.
That's fantastic.
Yep. And then that's the taxable event. And then you will pay on that taxable event the following tax year. Okay. So if you sold in 2025, you'd pay for it on 26 taxes. 26, you'd pay on the 27 taxes. Okay. Again, not an account. All right. I have to say that. All right. Let's go to home preparation tips. And this one I'm going to go through pretty easy. Like, how do you get the best return? How do you get the best price coming through? There's a common belief that the nicer the home, the more money you're going to get, right? That's a common belief. Makes sense, doesn't it? House is nicer, it should sell for more money, right? The answer is probably, if you're comparing apples to apples, right, in the same neighborhood, so forth. But it doesn't mean you're going to net the most money, right? And that's the part to understand. So, because this is the basis where you come through for netting versus sales price. Because sometimes you'll see in a home in a neighborhood that sells for $300,000 less than another home, but the owner that sold for $300,000 less actually netted more money than if they would have had their house in the same condition as the one that sold for $300,000 more, right? So there's 3 different levels that go through. So let me talk about those 3 levels. The first one is as is, right? 2 things about as is. As is means, here's my house, come and buy it. I'm not doing anything, right? It does not mean that you don't disclose anything, right? And it doesn't mean that you're able to hide things. Everything still has to be disclosed. Everybody's still open to everything, right? It just means that the buyer is saying, I understand what needs to be done here and I'm willing to take it on, right? So that's as is. The mid-range option is basically like you update your floors, you paint the property, right? You change light fixtures, maybe countertops, something like that. You don't do a full-blown remodel, but you do it enough where the house is nice enough that somebody can come in, they're happy to live there, and they can make upgrades as they want to in the future, right? That's the middle range. And then the last one is basically a full-blown remodel. You got everything, you redo the entire house, right? And you go from there and you have basically a brand new house, right? Coming out of there, except for the structure, right? Now, here's where the determinations come to what's right for you. There's 2 big factors, money and time, right? As is your time, boom, we're ready to go, right? We've done our inspections, we've got everything out there, good, let's sell the house, right? It doesn't take you time. The middle range is probably going to take 2 to 3 weeks of preparation, right? To come through there. And then you're ready to go. Usually in the middle range, Every house is different, different sizes, different amount that needs to be done. Usually you're going to spend somewhere between $30,000 and $60,000, right? Somewhere around that range is what's going to be done to get the work done. Then it's a matter of what you're going to net based on that 30 to 60, right? 2 to 3 weeks to get it done. Then it's the full blown remodel. If anybody's paid attention to contractor prices these days, so they're a lot of fun. So a full blown remodel on a 1,600 square foot house is probably going to cost you $200,000 to $300,000, depending on what you're doing. Okay, so when you come through that, then you're like, okay, here's that cost of 200 to 300, and it's going to take me 3 or 4 months to do this, right? So if you have a mortgage, if you have a reverse mortgage, if you have a certain balance, you have to understand that as part of a cost for that period of time as well, right? So coming through that process, that in there is where you decide, okay, if I go as is, it doesn't really cost me much, but I'm going to sell for less. Well, what's that net going to be after my mortgage is paid off, after those costs are done, costs of sale are done, and so forth. Middle range, same thing. It's going to take me a little bit longer to get to the market. So what's my period for that, months to 6 weeks, right? To cover the cost of owning the home and then to do the repairs and then get that little higher sales price. And then the full blow, and I do the full remodel. Here's where we go. It is different in every scenario. In some aspects, I've seen where the full remodel makes sense for somebody. In some aspects, I've seen where it makes no sense. We have a perfect example. We talked about that house on La Jolla. That was a perfect example. They sold for more than a remodeled house, and they just did basic touch up, right? So they made a lot more money coming to the process, coming out of that. We've had the same thing. So a place in Cupertino, remember we went on the market, we sold, it was a townhouse actually at the end of Stevens Creek here. And we sold for like 1.85 million. And there was another one in the neighborhood that sold for 1.95 million. They're like, holy cow, you guys sold for like $100,000 less than the same house across the street. The same house that had $300,000 worth of remodel, right? $100,000 less. The owner actually netted $200,000 more than that house that sold for $100,000, right? And so you have to look at what's that net price, because it's nice and pretty to say, I'm the highest sales price in the neighborhood. It's even prettier to say, look how much money I put in my bank, right? And so those are the pieces that we look at on there. So keep those in mind. Yes.
What insights do you have on the types of buyers that you have in the market when comparing direct end user compared to developer, builder, or bank?
Yeah.
Because the banks, I think, right now are the largest property owners.
Yes.
And the way I see it, when relating that to as is, update, or remodel.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of the homes in my particular neighborhood, I just see being sold and then demolished, done right up. But
Yep.
that's post sale.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
not the seller doing that. And I'm thinking, is that the bank that's doing that, or is that the new seller? Or it's because that would really change, I guess, the strategy.
Exactly. You're right. Yeah. And it's a great question, because that's part of your whole marketing, right? When you're going through it, who's my end user, right? Who is this going to attract, right? The home that's as is or has minimal work done. Let's just start with as is. It's usually going to attract a builder or a flipper, right? It's going to attract somebody who's like, hey, I'm willing to pay a price for this house. They're also very logically motivated by their offer. They're not emotionally motivated, right? So here's the numbers that make sense. I'll pay this for your house because I know I have to do this for the house to put it on the market for this and make that, right? So you'll get that. They're usually clean. They're usually fast. They're usually all cash. They usually close quick. You just have to make sure that you're dealing with the right one. Some of them are trying to get a really good deal. It's a business decision for them. You can still negotiate with them, right? We've gotten one, as a matter of fact, that La Jolla that we talked about, that was a builder that bought the house. They paid market value for it because they knew the neighborhood that was there. So they weren't afraid to say, we know we have to pay to get the house, so we can go do the work. So that can still work. Again, you just have to be on to see it. The middle of the road is going to run into some of the builders, some of the people that are going to do the work, but it's also going to run into the people that are trying to get into that neighborhood, right? That can't afford to buy the fully remodeled house, but they want to get those schools or they want to get into that neighborhood, right? So they're going to come in there. It'll usually atone to a lot of first-time home buyers, right? Or move up buyers from a condo or a townhome if they're going to a single family home, right? And then the full remodel, that's going to attract the people that are I don't want to do anything. I want my house to be just right, right? And I'm willing to pay the price for it. And so that's going to be the things you get. But you're also going to have people that are I don't want to pay that price to get that house, right? So you'll have that fun. Does that help?
Yeah, is there any distinction as to who of those three categories pays more?
No, it literally comes down to the house, the location, right? What neighborhood you're in. All of those are going to be the factors. And it depends on who's there at that time. You know, you can do a whole bunch of exposure, and I'll talk about this later. A whole bunch of exposure. You can have a bunch of people through your open house. A lot of times it's just a matter of luck, right? Who's that right person that was in that right house on the week that you were on the market that loves it, right? Or that has to have, or has to build a new home there, or whatever it is, right? And so it's just exposure to find that and to limit it from a luck factor, right? Get that. Thank you for that question. I like that one. That was awesome. Yes.
If I swap house, I buy, let's say I sold, I sell in San Jose and then buy in Cupertino, do I need to pay that capital gains tax?
Yeah, capital gains. So capital gains is going to apply if it's your own personal residence. Okay. So no matter what, it just has to do with that house. It doesn't have to do with buying anything else or selling anything else. But there is something called a 1031 exchange, which is probably what you're thinking about. So a 1031 exchange is a factor where you can sell a property and defer that tax gain and carry it into another property. However, those are only for income properties. They're not for personal residence. So if you have a rental, you can do that as a 1031 exchange, but you cannot 1031 exchange your own house
Okay,
that you live in.
okay.
Okay, awesome, perfect. All right, so which ones maximize? What improvements maximize interest? The most effective really is just the mid-range stuff, paint and flooring. Paint and flooring always makes a big difference. Paint, flooring, sage the property. The house looks completely different, just doing that. So those are the big ones. Curb appeal is important because you want people to come in the house, right? So even if your house is gorgeous on the outside and the front looks terrible, they might not even come in, right? And so have the curb appeal nice enough and clean enough where they're like, oh geez, let's go inside. And then maybe if they walk inside, they go, oh, at least they'll be like, it looks nice on the outside. But have the curb appeal to get them inside, right? So that's important. Then you go to kitchen. Kitchen, if you're a big project, kitchen is the moneymaker. It always is, right? Always is. Everybody wants a nice kitchen. After that, it goes to bathrooms, right? Our next. It's starting with the primary bathroom, right? The homeowner's bedroom's bathroom. That's the one that's most important, not the hall bathroom, right? So that one comes first, then go into the hall bathroom. And then the key factor that you want to remember when you're doing these upgrades is when you're on the market, you're always going to be compared to the other homes that are on the market, right? So you have to look at those and compare those to what yours looks like right now. Look at the ones that are currently pending, see what they did, compare that, because those same people that go in those houses are coming in your house, right? So you have to know what they're doing compared to what you're doing to make sense coming through there. So all of it, by the way, can be broken down, and we talked about that. Everything can be broken down on a case-by-case basis, what it costs, what it means when you do those things, what the time frame is, and you can see what you net. Gary, this is had a home up in Blossom Valley, and I remember first coming to his home. He was getting ready to retire, and he was retiring because he had to retire, not because he chose to retire. Right? He had some health conditions that he was dealing with and stuff and couldn't work anymore. So his house, he was introduced to me by his ex-wife. They were friends, and he lived by himself. He lived like a true bachelor, so in the house, and the house was pretty beat up. Like there wasn't even a bathroom door. There was no stove, right? There was all this. So he was starting to go, he's like, you know what? I see all these advertisements like on the street poles and on TV that I'll buy your house for cash, right? So he started reaching out to those people to talk to them. His ex-wife said, no, don't do that. Talk to Keith first. So brought us in. The people that were willing to come in, you see it up there, they offered $1,050,000 for his house. We'll buy $1,050,000. That house, we cleaned up the front yard because I'm not tall, but I couldn't see over the front yard. Okay. So that's what that front yard looked like. So we cleaned up the front yard. We got stuff out of the back. We just cleaned up the inside a little bit, right? We held open houses. We did massive exposure. We sold the house for $1.3 million in 2 weeks of patience because of exposure, right? And so that's one of the big pieces that come through. if somebody's offering something off market, sometimes they're great, but you have to measure what great means, right? In comparison, and be talking to somebody that can say, yeah, that's a good deal. But sometimes it looks like a good deal and it's not. The best part about that, and I still feel it when I sat down and talked to Gary when he was done, because he couldn't work anymore. This was it. He was moving out of the area. It was all there. He goes, that extra money just changed my life. And it gives me shivers every time I hear it. And then just to know that having that right person, having the right advice, when you have that Sherpa down the thing, makes all that difference. So yes, that,
I remember he didn't really have much of investors, right?
right, correct. Everything was the house. Yeah, that's all he had. He had nothing outside of the house. Yeah. So yeah, that was pretty powerful. So that's that story there. With that, you guys have heard me talk so much. I'm going to let Chris come up here and talk to you. All right. 10 years of experience, just like me. When I was his age, I looked like I was 15. But he rocks it out. He's going to talk a little bit about, disclosures and stuff for you here.
Let me take this guy over. There we go. You can just leave. It'll catch me.
Okay.
There we go. Awesome. So always a wealth of knowledge, always brings us to. So I'm really going to dive into like the importance of like disclosures, transparency, right? This is through the process of sales. So we've really presented everything when it comes to the house, but now a lot of home sellers will always have this idea, well, I don't want to overshare, because if I overshare, it's actually going to hurt the sale. And so we really want to avoid that, because what happens if you're actually being transparent about what's going on with the house, you're avoiding things down the line, right? Because you can get into a lot of legal mess. You can have pretty much shoot yourself in the foot when it comes to these types of things. So when we're looking at protection, right, we just don't want to give people the ability to come back and renegotiate down the line is really what we're looking for. So a good example of this is, say you have a unlicensed contractor do work. This is not uncommon, right? People do this all the time when it comes to their houses, right? But if you were not to disclose that and something comes down the line, a buyer buys it, maybe they open up a wall, they find out about the work you did, right? They can still come after you, even if it's years down the line, despite your actual disclosure to that person. So that's why it becomes really important across the board. So when it comes, like, you don't want to be hesitant with this. It's better to like over disclose, like I said, than under disclose. And if everybody's familiar with it, right, you have your seller's disclosures, your SPQ. So you just have to talk about the history of the house. This is where it's really important to get your inspections done, like property inspection, termite inspection, roof inspection. And you want to make sure when you're doing all these things, don't use your like one-stop shop. There's a lot of companies that'll do that, but you'd rather have somebody that's actually finding everything. Because next thing you know, buyers bring in a different inspector that like really knows what they're doing, and your inspector dropped the ball. Now that inspector or you are going to be liable for what you missed out overall when you're actually doing those types of things. So they are harder to find when you find that one-stop shop. They do exist, but just like keep that in mind. So most of the time, every market is different. If you're looking to like invest outside of California, right, you'll see that submarkets can be different with how disclosures are put out, how inspections are done. But here, at least, most of the time, we're going to have those inspections up front. You'll still come across those homes that might not have inspections ready up front, but most of the time we'll usually see sales prices affected, just because if you don't know what you don't know, right? So if you're walking into a situation, most of the time a buyer is going to overanalyze what those costs might be. So if we give those costs to them up front, we pretty much take that out of the game. It's harder for them to negotiate with us at the same time because they know what they know. Everything's across the board. The other things that are important, like realistically in inspections too, is you want to try to handle those things that are small. We talked about as is earlier, and as is can be a good route to go if you're really going fast and quick. But a lot of the under the hood items can be taken care of pretty simply. And for the costs that you're taking on, and for a turnkey style looking buyer, they're going to be much happier to just move forward overall than have to take their time and kind of go through that route altogether. So that's really what it comes to when it comes to disclosures and inspections. When you have an agent that sends you disclosures to say, hey, please just fill these out to the best of your ability, that is usually a very, very big red flag. So always watch out when it comes down to that, because you really want to sit down with somebody and go over it. A lot of the time, just as we all understand, lawyers, we're in California, we love to sue each other. That's why we have stacks and stacks of contracts that we have to fill out at the end of the day. But when you actually know how to fill these things out, we're able to put it in the best of light, because we do want to disclose, but we also don't want to, bring up people's imagination with the things that we're disclosing at the same time. People will still jump to conclusions. So that is overall where we're looking at with disclosure inspections. The next thing that we're going to go walk into is really the seller flow chart. So you got that?
Yep, okay.
Okay, so starting off, we're really just going to interview your realtors with intent, right? So really know what you want. Every real estate agent has like a different style. Yeah. Oh yeah, of course. Go for it.
And there's also a copy of that in your folder. Yes. Yeah, for sure.
Yep. So interview realtors with intent, right? You know, you have everything from a full service agent, right, to a discount agent, right? Everybody's going to offer different things. Discount agent is usually going to come across, have you fill out everything. They're just going to throw it online. Full service at the same time is really going to walk you through every step. And that's really important because you just want to understand. It's the same thing. Everybody's got preferences. Say you're driving a car. Some people love to drive that Ferrari, but they want everything taken care of them. They want the luxury experience. Some people, you know, are okay with taking the risk with the beater, and that's okay. Sometimes it works out for them. Some people like to just keep it traditional, drive that Honda Civic that lasts 30 years, right? They can all work out. It just depends on what you were looking for at the end of the day. So just once again, comparing that white glove service, limited service, etc. Next thing we really want to do is decide on strategy, right? So Keith touched upon this the most. We're deciding on whether we want to do as is, we want to do repairs, updates, modeling, staging, all of those types of things. Sometimes it can make sense not to stage a home, especially if it's a beater, fixer upper. We just want investors there, etc. through the gates. All right, next up, we're going to establish our marketplace and timeline. So this is once again where it goes in. You just want to understand comps, right? Comps become really important. A lot of people think they can find a house that sold 6 months ago and compare their current house. The market changes, right? Every house is different. The things that we're looking for the most are pending homes, of course, because pending homes are really going to give us that idea of what is currently moving in the market. You know, just the home across the street, understanding that they got 4 offers at some point is going to give us a lot better of an equipment to get that going. The number one reason people cancel is really for like new discoveries. Once again, we have a lot of non-contingent offers in the Bay Area, right? Especially when we're in a hotter moving market. I'd say maybe like 70-75% of the time.
Yeah.
So typically if we have a non-contingent offer, and once again, if somebody finds a new disclosure, right, technically that actually gives them an additional 3 days of contingencies. And so that actually gives people the opportunity to renegotiate or back out of the deal, which once again is really important why we need to disclose that up front. All right. Next up, we're going to want to talk about performing upgrades and repairs. Very simple. I know we went over a lot of this, but just usually that's going to take that 2 to 5 week time frame. We're going to go roll through that. A lot of times surprises come up. We do have to deal with those. So we're just talking to our inspectors and everything and re-understanding how to do that. Okay. We talked about completing disclosures with your real estate agent. Once again, sit down with them, actually go through this. It's going to be a lot more beneficial to you at the end of the day. And then next up, we got staging videos and photos. So this really goes along that idea where you are really looking for your exposure. So the more that you can kind of show about the property, you really shouldn't have like an agent that's trying to talk about them when it comes to the actual video and things like that. We want to showcase the actual property as well as the neighborhood, because ultimately that's what people are buying for, whether it's for schools or anything across the board like that as well. And then when we're moving on, we're going to go on to the MLS. Usually you're going to want to go on the MLS about midweek. Typically that's when people are going to kind of see when new inventory is coming. They start planning their weekend as well at the same time.
Chris, we have a comment online. What is the MLS?
Yeah, great question. So MLS, multiple listing service. Really here, it's just when you have a license in real estate, you're able to access everything that gets put up. That's where agents put up properties, prices, any, specific notes and any specifics about the house.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so now moving on from the MLS, we're going to talk about open houses, right? So why are open houses important? A lot of agents will post those really just meet other clients. But one of the best things that we get about that is we also get neighbors to come into the open houses. And so the better that we host these open houses, The more that we can have people talk, a lot of the time when people are coming through your open house and you're hosting it well, and you have neighbors talking about what's good about the neighborhood, people start to feel that connection to the home. And so we're going to get a little bit of that. Overall, we have exposure as well. And it gives people the time to walk through, ask questions, see it as their own. So that becomes important. When we're looking at open houses, you really want to do more than just the standard. Most of the time, it's usually Saturday, Sunday, 1 to 4. But a lot of time, it's good to have like a neighbor's open house specifically as well. But if you also start, strategically building up like a Thursday, Friday for 4 to 7 as well, and then maybe an extended period of time of like 1 to 5 on Saturday and Sunday, you get to catch a little bit of those stragglers, because a lot of people will stack houses consistently and then they won't make it. And so even just having that extra time tends to have a little bit more carryover from other open houses just in the area as well. Next thing we're going to move on to is reviewing offers. When we're reviewing offers, there's a lot of big aspects that we really want to focus on. A price, contingencies, prices, lenders. We want to see qualifications, how much people are putting down, right? A lot of people will put offers together very quickly, especially investors and things like that. You have to verify all these, right? Because if you're presenting a lot of this information to the actual seller and you haven't verified these offers, sometimes this offer can't even come together, right? So some people will put a foot forward that's not really there, and they're kind of showing a little bit more of what is unrealistic. So when you're verifying all these, whether it's with the lenders, understanding what their proof of funds are, those types of things, then we can actually start checking away who's not available. This also gives us the idea, as we're verifying, to come back to these offers and even just start that conversation verbally and understanding where's the movement looking like at this point. A lot of people will just throw their lowest offer as like an anchor price just to have an understanding that they might be able to negotiate down. But in reality, a lot of these people are going to step up if given the opportunity to. So that whole actual counter offer situation is going to be where the most of the negotiation and ability to actually drive up that final sales price at the end of the day. And then that's where a lot of the time, even if somebody comes in with a contingency, because people feel comfortable with contingencies, but in reality, if there's 4 offers on the table, a non-contingent offer is likely going to get the house, unless maybe that non-contingent offer is a much higher price than any of the other offers, but you're confident with them because that contingency they have in place is probably something very small or minute, but we're still going to get them to wipe that out at the same time. Okay. So yeah, going through that again, we're talking to our buyer's agents, talking to lenders, verifying funds, and then going into renegotiation. So a lot of agents will come in, they'll see their offers, they'll say, wow, this one looks great. It's already over our asking price, we're good terms, etc. You should never stop there, right? Because you'd be so surprised at how many people, just given the opportunity, are willing to pay that extra price, and they'd be happy paying that. They just didn't have the chance to step up, so they got pretty much kicked out. I've had plenty of situations with buyers on the same side where we've written offers and they would have been happy to pay $50,000 above their current offer to get the house, and we lose the house over $25,000, right? And so given that opportunity, a lot of people actually show their true colors in that whole negotiation style. Right. And then, yeah, just going back to that too, just like talking about it, the majority of people really don't submit their top offer first. Some people understand the strength of it. I've worked with plenty of people that have been in the market for honestly a year, and they keep writing offers and offers. And then usually once they've gotten a little exhausted, then they'll start writing offers that are actually serious and finally get the house. Just the irony behind that is that sometimes after 3 months, if you're nickel and diming and you try to save $20,000 here, etc., those people stay in. So having that conversation on the sales side and really just understanding what are these buyers' goals are going to help you really unearth the best strategy for your negotiation at the end. And then understanding all terms and timelines. Like I said, we talked about inspections, we talked about understanding if they need rent backs, those types of things. And so those are little things that we do want to offer just to pull everything together at the end of the day. All right. And then moving back through contingencies, I'll just go over like the basics that we usually see across the board. We usually have a property contingency. That's the easiest contingency to bring forth. I always like to explain that as that's like the house looked at me a little funny and I can back away from the deal if I feel like it. But most of those property contingencies, if they're in, are usually going to be about 3 to 7 days. And so that's typically when a buyer is going to want to get additional inspections and things like that. So if we point back to when we disclosed and had those inspections up front, we're really getting rid of this because it's going to be a lot harder for people to find things if we use good inspectors and we've given transparency to the entire sale of the home overall. Okay. And then next thing we're going to move in is destaging, packing, and notifications. So pretty much we are going to notify everybody of what's next in the move. We always like to get people moving ahead as quickly as possible, especially now with insurance and things like that on the buyer side. We do see delays, right? So just having that up front and like actually having a strategized timeline is always going to be really helpful on the sales side just to alleviate any surprises down the line. Finally, we're going to move in to the sign off. And so at the sign off, we're pretty much just going to make sure that all the numbers are correct across the board. We want to make sure the loans tagging up, we're going to be able to understand what the cost of close are, those types of things. And so at the closing table, making sure that all of those are understood are going to make sure that we're confident to close. If we see any discrepancies at that point, that's where we really want to call it at the end instead of just signing off, because we want to make sure anything is alleviated, because once we've closed, there's no going back at that point. And then finally, you get to closing day. So once everything's closed through, you get to celebrate a little bit. Make sure you keep everything, having your taxes together, all that kind of good stuff is going to keep you moving forward. And pretty much that is the actual transition in a nutshell. So thank you.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks, Chris. Yep. We got two quick things to do. We can get you guys out of here. Two more topics to talk about that I think you'll enjoy. The first thing that I wanted to mention on there, that little piece right there, that chart that you see up there. Hold on one second. Hey, Chris, come over here. Sorry, I just got to grab the camera here. For come to me. Did it? You get it. There you go. All right, perfect. All right. So thank you. Yeah,
Down through the year.
we're gonna hit that. That's coming up. Those are the last two topics. So you already set it up for me. Nice job. So the first thing I wanted to hit on a couple of things on there. That chart up there that he had. I have to tell you that it takes like an hour and a half to 2 hours to explain that thing thoroughly, right? To go through what's really there and what's going on. So to hear that in 10 minutes, there's a lot of questions. We're here for the questions afterwards. A couple of things I want to touch on what he said. We've seen disclosures out there where the representative for the seller handed the packet of paperwork of disclosures to the seller and said, go ahead and sign that, right? And doesn't give them any guidance. We see those all the time in the industry. They're clearly errors on them because they don't have to do it every day. They're not used to it. They don't even know what they answer half of the time. But the other big part, those are the ones that cause lawsuits. Those are the ones that get sellers in trouble. So when that happens, because they missed something that they should know because they didn't have the guidance. So whenever those disclosures are done, whoever is your Sherpa or guiding you through the process of real estate, have them sit down with you and do those disclosures, whether it's over Zoom or in person or whatever it is. Just make sure they're there with you when you do them. The Chris mentioned neighbors at open houses. One of the best things about neighbors at open houses is they live in the neighborhood for a reason. So when they come into the open house, they go and tell their coworkers and their friends and their family, right? And they get that exposure. So that is huge. And I'll talk about that when we talk about methods, effective marketing strategies as well. But the last thing that I wanted to touch on, negotiations. Chris talked about how always negotiate, right? Just because you got 10 offers in and you got a great price and great terms doesn't mean you have the best offer. You have the best offer that was submitted, but you might not necessarily have the best offer, right? What I've seen that's happened in this industry, unfortunately, over the last few years, because I've done this for almost 3 decades now. Isn't that crazy? That's where all this is. So, but in that time, over the last 3 years, 4 years, 5, people like sellers agents have stopped negotiating. They don't counteroffer. And so like they take their 10 offers and they're like, well, we got the best price and we got great terms. Congratulations, right? And you're happy because it looks great. But what you don't realize is the buyer that came in second or third place was willing to pay more than that, right? They just didn't submit that best offer. And there was a house in Santa Clara, beautiful house. We had like 15 offers, right? Great prices. Everything looks fantastic. Sellers were super happy. And I'm like, we talked to all of these agents that wrote offers. We verified all their stuff. There's somebody willing to pay more, right? So let's put a multiple counter offer and give them a chance to improve, right? when we did that, there were 4 offers that came back higher than what the original price was. One of them was $250,000 higher than the first highest offer that we got on a $1.6 million house. Right? So never let that lie, because I mean, it's funny because the realtor or the Sherpa, we don't really make a ton of money off of that difference, but you do. Right? And that's what it means to do your job correctly, right? To come through there. So don't leave that one laying out there. All right. Thank you, Chris, for all that. The effective marketing strategies. So this is pretty interesting because there's all kinds of marketing strategies. This is the great thing about the opportunity of realtors out there. None of them do things the same way. You might think they do, they don't. So there's a couple different things. I like to call it land, sea, and air. Land, sea, and air is like a military tactic, right? You get them everywhere. By land, by sea, by air. Marketing should be the same way, right? There's what I'll refer to, because I can, because of my age, old school marketing. Knock on people's doors, drop stuff on the doorsteps, hold open houses, call people up on the phone, so on and so forth, right? That's still very effective, okay? But it's not the only thing that works, right? There's also online, right? Video, SEO, the exposure that you have online. What are the different places? You came on through an Instagram ad, right? So having that exposure to come out, this is a fun part, YouTube, and we'll put that YouTube up here. I've mentioned it before. If you see one of the homes that we sold on YouTube, you'll see the amount of views on there. They're usually about 150 to 200,000 views of somebody watching that video. This is my challenge. If you're interviewing agents, go look at their YouTube and see how many people are watching their video. Usually it's like 10, right? So it's the exposure. There's a whole system behind it on what goes through. So that's all kind of the new school, modern exposure to get all of that. Because where are you going to find most people? Right there, right? That's where they're going to be. And so both methods, they both work. They can both work individually, but when you use all of them, you know it will work, right? And that's the process. So being really effective on what you're doing for land, sea, and air, getting that all out there. The other thing, and Chris touched on this, that exposure that comes up, one of the most important things about your marketing is not, look at this 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath house that's 1,600 square feet on a 10,000 square foot lot. That's not marketing, that's data. Okay? Marketing is, we're a block away from Cuesta Park. We're walking distance to the coffee shop, right? These are the schools that are part of the neighborhood. These are the events that happen here, right? People buy a lifestyle. They buy the property within that lifestyle, right? So truly effective marketing is lifestyle. What does that house represent? What does living in that neighborhood represent, right? That's important. That's really effective. And not only that, if anybody's familiar with SEO, right? That's how you track online as to whether people are going to view your house or not, right? Those are all the things that come up when people are searching. People don't usually search, I want a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, right? Maybe you can go into Zillow and put 3-2, but you're looking at a particular neighborhood, right? So they're looking for things. So that'll push all of those things up. So something to be honest. And then the other thing that I have to say, let's be honest. We talked about this a little bit earlier. When it comes to exposure and getting a bunch of people to look at your house, there's always luck involved. That we mentioned earlier, that one person that happens to be in town that week that has been waiting for a home on that street and is willing to pay the top price to get it, right? That's going to make a difference. So sometimes it's just that person. So what do we do to balance out the luck? You just have maximum exposure, right? You have not an open house from Saturday and Sunday 1 to 4, open house Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 12 to 5. Make sure everybody can get there. They don't have to make a choice on seeing your home or another home. They see your home, right? So getting that massive exposure out there helps to leverage the luck at the same time. So that is really, really critical when you're doing the marketing strategies. So just leverage both of those. All right, let me get to the last piece and then we'll do some Q&A. I believe you asked me the question, when's the best time to sell? So that was, you put it right up there and this is what we're going to finish with. So now I love it. See, here's the most common perception for best time to sell. People think it's season, right? Summer, right? there's a lot of activity in the summer because people aren't in school, right? That's the reference for that and what happens there. So, if you would have asked me this question before the pandemic, I would have told you the best time to sell is going to be in the spring, going into the summer, right? When people are making decisions based on school. That's what I would have told you. However, the market has been different every single year since the pandemic. We've had tariffs to deal with. We've had interest rates to deal with, right? We've had all of this stuff to go around and happen. So it's been a wild ride over these last few seasons. And so seasons switch now. This is a year again, like most of the sales activity that happens in a year happens in the second quarter of the year. So the most pending sales that happen, the largest amount, is in the second quarter of the year, April, May, June, because it's a combination of most people being on the market, right? And it's one of the things to think about. When more homes are on the market, there's going to be more sales because there's more opportunity. When less homes are in the market, like January, there's less sales because there's less opportunity. However, that absorption rate, that market heat index, is usually higher. There's more sales per house that's on the market because there's less competition. There's more people interested, right? Now, the biggest factor right now, because I would have said, you want to put your house in the market after the Super Bowl, right? So it's funny how that works, but the week after the Super Bowl, everything picks up. So especially this year, because if you all don't know, the Super Bowl is here in our area, Santa Clara, so it's made busy. But it picks up after that. So then it runs through summer, and then usually in the fall it slows down, mostly because people are back in school, right? And that's a big factor. Then you roll into the holidays, and usually holidays are interesting because all the serious buyers are out and the serious sellers are out. So transactions still happen and they still do well. You just have less people that are looking, and you have less people that are selling, right? So it's just kind of leveraging that piece that's on there. Less competition, right? That comes through there. Now, though, we have to look at different things. The tariffs took away the second quarter. So when all of the tariff stuff came out, that busy second quarter went, we're stopping. So it pushed it back, right? Because here's the piece people don't keep in mind. It's not like all those people that wanted to buy in the second quarter just said, well, I'm not buying anymore. They still want to buy. They're just on pause, right? And so now when that quarter pushes now to the third quarter, we're already seeing it. We have the highest pending sales in a week that we've had since March, this past week. And it's October.
Not normal.
Right? What's that?
Not normal.
Not normal. Not normal whatsoever. And so what we've basically done is said, okay, second quarter, pause. Okay, we're ready. And so now what usually is activity in the second quarter is happening right now in the third quarter. And we'll probably see it carry the fourth quarter. And if those interest rates come down at the end of this year, it will amp up fast, right? You will see tons of activity come out there because there's a lot of people, and we know because we see it all the time in this industry, a lot of buyers just like, okay, when is it going to hit 6? When is it going to hit 6? Hit 6. Okay, I'm buying, right? And they jump through there. So that's coming up. So all of that activity is right there. So timing is such a mess right now, right? So, and that's really the piece is you really have to be looking at like 60 to 90-day increments of what's happening at that time and keeping an eye on it just because of all of the stuff that's going on. So anytime can be fine. Anytime can be bad. Just know ahead of time what you're doing, right? Have a client right now with the home in Los Gatos wanted to go on the market during what was happening and it wasn't good. We went on the market for a couple of weeks and said, oh, this isn't working. Here's what we're seeing. Here's what's changed. Let's come off. We'll come back on the market later, right? They're coming back on the market in a couple of weeks. And we're going to see a totally different animal, right? I know what happens there. So you really just have to kind of pay attention to what's on there. But usually it is seasonally. Usually it's spring to summer. But everything that's happened in the pandemic, if you paid attention during the pandemic or watched that, holy cow, because people couldn't even leave their house, right? So, and then the moment that came out, it was like a year of pent up demand. They just went crazy. That was our first shoot up of those things. So again, it's just whatever the conditions are, because the relevant conditions that's happening in the economy supersedes the seasons, right? If everything's just kind of normal, then the seasons will come into effect. And then it's usually going to be spring or summer. But in something like this, the best time to sell this year might be November, based on everything that we're seeing right now. So the only November I would say don't sell is an election year. Election year in November, nobody buys houses. So because they're afraid of change and they want to see what happens first. So that's the only piece that I want to get in there. All right. You guys have been wonderful making it through all of this. I wanted to share a couple of things with you. Again, when I asked earlier, oh, I did not change this, did I? Oh, no, I did. Okay, sorry. For some reason, I forgot what month I was in. So, but if you found this useful, please share it with other people. Tell them about it. Those are our next events. The January 22nd is the buyer workshop that we do, which is basically like everything we did here, except geared towards people that are buying. And then next Saturday the 24th, is the time we get there. If you follow that website right there, you'll always see the updates that come through at Bay Area Buyer Workshop. This is the other piece, and you also have a copy of this in your folder. So if you go into your folder, I wanted to talk about this because we're very, very passionate about this site. The QR code, if you want to scan it there. Our real estate channel on YouTube is the most watched channel here in the Bay Area by far for real estate. It's not even close. We've had over 3 million views. We have over 18,000 subscribers. So we have a commitment to make sure that educational and market specific data is out there, right? It's not self-promotion, it's educational and market data, right? So be sure to check that out coming through there. And then if you want to follow us on any of our socials, that'll take you to everything. If you want to follow us on Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn or YouTube or whatever, that button right there will take you to all of it. And then on that, the last thing that I would offer here, you guys, happy to take questions. The last thing I would offer, we poured a lot of information, and this goes online too. There was a lot of information poured on here. If you still had questions or you needed more focused follow-up on something, just let us know. We're happy to sit down over coffee, talk about it anytime, never any obligation from us. So we're easy to go. We want you to be educated and know the process. So we put that extension out to you. Just let us know and ready to go. Final thing, let's hit Q&As. Inside your folder, there's a little survey. If you wouldn't mind taking a moment to tell us how we did, and I love honest feedback, right? That would be fantastic. So we'd appreciate that as well to take that. And outside of that, we are good unless anybody here has more questions. You guys have been great with questions, but I'm happy to answer more. Yes.
Just a little bit of clarity or around like contingencies
Yeah.
and around, I guess, liability in inspections should something like after the sale. If we've done a roof inspection, termite inspection, whatever,
Yeah.
foundation inspection, and then they find something, whatever,
Yeah.
something with the property.
Yeah.
A year from now.
Yep.
What is her exposure?
Perfect. I love it. As long as you do everything correctly and honestly, there's no exposure. So once that house transfer hands, it's on them, right? Some things happen after the house transfers. Some things just weren't discovered. The bottom line is the buyer has the responsibility to discover stuff. As a seller, you have the responsibility to disclose everything that you know, right? So, but as the buyer, if there was something you didn't know, didn't show up in an inspection, you're not going to be liable for it unless it can be shown that you did know about it, right? And so one of the things I've seen when we're doing disclosures, it will never hurt you to over disclose, never, because somebody's still going to buy the house, right? There was a scenario. We had a client referred to us on a house, also in Willow Glen, actually, was referred to us from past clients, and they were listed with another realtor, weren't having any success. Came over to us, we got their house sold. It turned out that they weren't completely honest about work that was done to their foundation. We didn't know it. We had inspections done. They didn't catch it, right? Over time, the new owners found out. But then it was found out that the seller actually knew what the issue was and purposefully did not disclose it. It cost that seller $250,000, right? Afterwards. And so that whole piece is just be honest. It's going to be there. And if it is an issue that we have to deal with, just deal with it ahead of time. Right. And that's one of the great things about having inspections ahead of time and be like, holy cow, I didn't know this. This is going to be detrimental. Let's just take care of it. So, and then put it on the market. But that's a great question. So as long as it's clean, right, with what was disclosed and what's out there, it's homes are as is at that point when they close. Okay. Does that help?
Yes, sir.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. Anything else from you two over there? Any questions? You're good? Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much. Thanks for everybody online for being here. We really appreciate it. So we'll be around too afterwards, and take pastries home with you. Okay.